Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another thunderously loud and speedy installment of Thunderdome Metal Reviews. Tonight we're reviewing Judas Priest's 1990 album, Painkiller, which I've been listening to for a long damn time, pretty much since it came out. With me, as always, are the other three cylinders of this ferocious engine, Benjamin, Gabriel, and Tracy. How are you gentlemen doing this fine, very chilly January evening?
I feel like I'm caught between the hammer and the anvil. I think we all do.
I mean, you know, sometimes I feel like a night crawler, given how late we do the show and how dark it gets.
And just living bad dreams.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Well, I have to say, this album definitely killed some pain for me this week and continues to kill lots of pain. So
that's what it's for.
Excited to talk about it.
We're having a metal meltdown.
We've been in the middle of a metal meltdown for like 2 years, Tracy.
You might be caught in a metal meltdown right now if you're listening.
Indeed. To this. You definitely are caught in a metal meltdown. Let me give you some details. As David said, this came out in 1990 on 9/3 of the year, to be precise. It was the 12th studio album, recorded in Mirabel Studios in Cologne, France, and Wijsloord Studios in Hilversum, Netherlands. I gotta say that there are probably a lot worse places to record your albums than that. It also came out on Columbia, as did the last album that we reviewed, which was Alice in Chains. The producer on this album was Chris Sesengridis, and I probably fucked that all up, but runtime is 4608. The band, you know them, you love them. Rob Halford on vocals, KK Downing on guitars, Glenn Tipton on guitars, Ian Hill on bass, and Scott Travis on drums. His first appearance on drums for the band was this album. And they brought Don Airy in to play keyboards and Mini Moog bass, which is an analog keyboard, essentially.
A Moog.
Interesting. So, looking at the dates, this came out 18 days before our previous album that we covered.
They sound incredibly different.
That's accurate. I listened to both at the time, but yeah, they're not the same.
Were they 18 days ahead of their time?
Well, this was definitely the beginning of a new era for Priest, I would say. I've heard some people go so far as to describe this album as them injecting death metal into their sound. I think that's not accurate. I do think they do that later on, but this was a much more, pardon the term, modern metal sound than a lot of their earlier stuff. But I mean, this is a band that's been had been doing this since like the mid 70s.
Yeah, it's mid 70s.
Yeah,
they've been around a long time, but they also had gone full 80s. They had chased the dragon, as Tracy always says, of popularity and become almost arena rock with like synths and lasers and shit by the time of Turbo, the album before this. So it was not the stripped down fast thing.
Turbo is damn near a disco album.
It's nearly a disco album. No, well, we can get into all that later. There's a lot going on here. But anyway, this is the album where they advanced through regression, so to speak, and went kind of backwards on purpose, stripped it down again, up the speed. And it was, this is the year of Rust in Peace and Seasons. And this was Thrash's, like, Mesozoic era, like the last heyday. Because after that, it sort of flips to death metal. Anyway, I've heard this described also as speed metal rather than thrash per se.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's got sort of, what is that? Venn diagram of power metal and thrash.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know they've used this labels then in that way, but
yeah.
I think that sounds accurate to me in the sense that some of this record does sound like power metal. And it has a certain amount of heaviness, but it does not sound any older than the 80s. You know what I mean? I think it does have that 80s stamp on it. But it's really, for me at least, and this is the only Judas Priest album that I've ever like spent any time with whatsoever. And I had listened to it before the podcast. It's appealing for those reasons, it's totally appealing. The speed is great. The intensity of the vocals is great. There's a lot to like. For sure.
And there's some camp too, right? It doesn't take itself too seriously.
They always had a bit of silliness in them that, like, the band that they often get lumped with, and I completely understand why, is Maiden. Maiden is nerds, but they're a different kind of nerd. They're more of a literary nerd. So these guys are kind of like pardon the term for our British listeners, but punters in a bar. There is a bit of camp and silliness to this. It's not quite guar, but it's also just got some of that late 80s cheese to it that is still there, which was kind of with them all the way through. But then they also had a side where they were doing covers of Joan Baez songs in the 70s.
Totally.
So, they just did not give two shits and just played what they kind of wanted to play.
Y'all, I played so much Warhammer listening to this fucking album, you have no idea. Warhammer 40K constantly. Yeah, I think it's so amped up, and it's just so good. This album is was in some ways even more than a return to form. It was just, it was, even now it just sounds so thunderous and awesome. It's just a wall of sound in terms of production, in terms of just the guitar playing will just melt your face off. This drummer, I'm sure, felt they had a lot to prove, so they are firing on all cylinders.
I think that actually added something to the band, and I'd have to go back and listen to Turbo and see what, it's sometimes
much slower. It's different.
But the pace on this is definitely up there.
Well, my only previous experience with Judas Priest is British Steel, which we did almost 2 years ago, it seems like. Actually, I think it was close to 2 years ago. And that album is and it's almost exactly a decade prior to this one.
Yeah, I think it was 80 or 81.
It's much more slower in terms of tempo. It's got a little more of that classic rock sound to it, a little more less. It's missing, I guess you say, the adrenaline that this album has to it. Because this album, from first track to the end, it's we're going to up it the speed by 50% on every song, regardless of what it's supposed to sound like. It's 50% faster than what we plan on it for it to be.
It's interesting to me that you bring that up, and not necessarily the speed, but just the two albums, because those are really the two albums where they are repositioning themselves for the metal landscape for the next decade.
Correct.
And they actually do reposition themselves in a few years after Halford leaves, but man, it just shows again that these guys were serious masters of the craft. And you can't, we talk about, of course, since we talk about metal, we talk about guitar playing a lot, but man, this twin guitar attack,
it's bananas.
Yeah.
Can I also say that these vocals are why I can't like most power metal Tracy tries to make me like. I said this to you every time we review Maiden or this. I'm like, if you don't have pipes like this, or I guess Britney Slays, it happens occasionally, but most of them can't match this, and so it just kind of falls flat to me, if that makes sense. It's like you've been to the La Scala Opera House in Milan, and then not that. Then you go to Branson, Missouri, and you're like, I don't know, dude. Yeah, I've been to the top of the power metal mountain, and between him and the human air raid siren, Bruce Dickinson, and I don't feel that way about all genres, but something about this one, you better be doing this, or I can't believe you.
I think what it is, David, you really enjoy power metal. You're just gatekeeping it so you don't admit it to yourself that you like more power metal than you do.
Well, that's just it. As far as the vocal lineage goes, I think you can trace this back to Plant. That this takes that Plant style of singing and carries it forward, whereas everybody else was doing Ozzy, which, as much as I love Ozzy is not a vocal talent on par with any of those guys.
Not at all.
Doesn't try.
He's not.
Doesn't try.
You're right. He doesn't try, and I appreciate the shit out of that. But and so if you're a dude trying to be in a band, it's if Ozzy can do it, just about anybody can do it, and that's a overstatement.
I know what you're saying.
But it's not I don't have to be Dickinson or Plant or Halford. I can be something else. But the guys who can do it, vocal talent is amazing, and the range and the power, and just the guy's nickname was the fucking Voice, for Christ's sake.
I know. Wall of Skulls had vocals that were approaching this. I will concede, Tracy.
Yes.
Right, that band. Anyway, I want to also highlight, we were talking about this a bit before we started, just the issue of his sexuality, Rob Halford's, because he wasn't out for another 8 years. And I showed my wife pictures of Rob Halford, how incredibly Village People he was rocking it. And the lyrics of some of these songs, it seems so obvious with hindsight, but people say the same thing about Elton John.
Well, to that, I mean, I had a sense. I think it was a generational thing. I think if you were
think so
like
too.
the guys who were like 5 years older than us, David, that you didn't see it. But people around our age, I feel kind of had clued into it a little bit.
Nightcrawler. I know there's a few of these. You're like, huh. It's yes.
I love Bites, which I don't think it's just not necessarily the songs on this album per se, but songs on some of the
Guys,
other
Leather
Rebel.
Leather
Yes,
Rebel.
yeah.
That's I sang some of that to Robin. She just stared at me. She's like, "What?" I'm like, and then see, look at this picture of him.
Yeah.
He's going to Studio 54.
Because when you see Rob Halford, he looks kind of like a leather daddy in the gay community. Like,
Okay,
and so
What do you mean, kind of, Tracy? Why are you adding additional things? He just is that. But people didn't know the coding, and like
No, they
because
didn't.
straight people are dumb and just were
Yeah.
like, "Oh, he's just fierce."
and I think part of it is also a level of denial in the older generations as well.
Sure,
Of course.
sure.
Because I think your
And
guys
yeah.
started to be more accepting in my generation, and Ian was more accepting and has become more accepting. And now the generation, like my nieces and nephews that are growing up in, are just like, okay, cool, you're gay. Next.
And rock for a long time, like kabuki theater, has created a certain permissible amount of gender bending. I offer you
Yes.
Twisted Sister, Boy George, and the entire glam scene of Los Angeles circa
I offer you
1988
David
to-
Bowie.
I offer you Sir David Bowie, just Motley Crue, y'all. It's interesting, no homo. Like there's sort of this rule goes back to ancient Greece.
But then that stuff was really popular too, like
was.
the hair metal stuff.
Of
And
course, that's what I'm saying. It
yeah.
gave you permission.
but yeah.
In a way
However,
that being openly gay, you were not.
People gave you permission by buying tickets to your shows and buying your records, right?
Yes, correct. It became a feedback loop.
Well, I also just love the fact that Rob was one of the first people to get Harley Davidson to send them a motorcycle so he could ride it out on stage.
Indeed.
So, but yeah, this like again, to go back to this specific album, a very modern, sleek sound that as Gabe said, doesn't sound older than it is. It sounds 80s, but not in a dated way necessarily.
Yeah, like you don't have that loss. I'm going to say loss in translation due to production that you have in some of the older albums from this time.
They spent
Like
a lot of money on this, man. I think this was.
I was wondering, is this a still like tape album or?
Oh
this
yes, my God,
digital?
yes. 1990. Yeah. This is way before digital.
And so, like you're not missing having any of that. I guess you can say loss in quality of that style at the time. Like this still holds up like incredibly well production value wise to a lot of albums coming out today.
Well, I'd
And
say the
this
same
is-
thing about the Maiden ones. When Columbia or Atlantic threw real money at them, and they got some of the people that sat in the chairs in this era. Yeah, they
Right.
were some of the best producers that have ever lived.
Yeah, totally. They had a budget for this album. They weren't recording it like a fucking bathroom someplace, and they also weren't of the mind of like, and some stuff that is recorded today could sound a lot better, but they think that for their genre of metal, that if it has real clear production, then it's not real metal anymore.
Whoa. What? So I'm just Red Fang.
Tell us how you really feel.
I'm
about
never
them,
not going to be
David.
mad about that. Black metal time. I know he was talking about black metal, but
I was talking about
that.
Yes.
Red Fang exists, and it makes me mad.
I actually don't mind it so much on Red Fang because I think
I
the
know you
production's
don't.
better than black metal, but
I think also for Red Fang genre, that kind of crappier quality adds to the sound because it adds that garage sound. But that's a tangent.
I need production that will defeat aliens and lyrics that sound like you're listing off Marine chapters in Warhammer 40K. And this album is that album.
it is, yeah. And the thing about it is, and I don't think the guys in Judas Priest would disagree. If somebody said, "Oh, you're an arena act," they'd be like, "Fuck right,
Fuck yeah, we are.
We're
I
also
saw you
more
in
metal
half.
than you." Yeah.
Yeah, we're also so much more metal than you.
I mean, it's also
would
just
show
like
up.
it's like bombastic, it's just like such a huge sound that they're going for. So it makes sense that that's kind of like amped up and over the top a little bit. I mean, especially the stuff on here that reminds me of like power metal, it totally fits,
And to unleash something like this as your 12th studio album, I'm impressed by that.
This didn't have Metallica's 12th album sounded.
I don't think
No,
Metallica's released its 12th album yet.
They've been that slow.
Yes.
They are pretty slow.
So it's,
If you count some of the garage days, they
I
probably
do,
are.
though.
I mean,
Yeah.
but they released Garage Days like 4 times. So let's see.
Yeah.
Are we counting live albums?
I don't know, Tracy. You're the
Megadeth.
spreadsheet guy.
12th
Megadeth.
album isn't this good. I'll
Iron
say that.
Maiden's 12th album. No, what is Iron Maiden's anyway? I didn't bother to line up.
So
the grid.
Metallica's released 10 or 11 albums right now. So their next one may be their 12th.
Well, it won't be as good as this.
Megadeth's 12th album was Head Crusher, which that's not a bad album actually.
Sure.
It's an okay album, but it's not as good as this.
I mean, I will take that album over any album Metallica's released since and Justice for All.
That I will too, but well, I'm not since of Justice for All.
For the Black
No,
album,
but-
you give that a good grade.
I'd still
Tracy.
take Head Crusher over Black Album.
Well,
Oh,
I think
Anyway.
You mean Painkiller? What is Pain Crusher? Is that an album you made up?
no, he's talking about the Megadeth album.
Oh, the
That's their
Megadeth
12th
album.
album.
Head Crusher.
Yeah, Head Crusher. That's their 12th
Well,
album.
Painkiller's better than album. I haven't even heard.
It is.
That's a
Well.
promise.
Shall we move into track?
Yeah, let's do it. We're tangenting too much now.
All of them, everyone should be listened to 6 times a day. Yeah, I will say it
Drink
opens- You drink everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Drink.
Sorry, Painkiller is one of the most face melting, spine destroying things that's ever existed on a record ever in terms of an opener, in my opinion. And all other openers are 2 or lower in terms of their quality.
So, I just want to say on Painkiller specifically, I always thought Painkiller was much earlier in their career, the
No.
way it sounded. And so it's crazy for an album to come out with that track as the 12th album. Just like, and this
They
is what we've had
rebooted.
on the back burner for 12
They
years.
did.
Their drummer
15.
exploded like in Spinal Tap, and they got a new one that came out of a pod, and that one played fast and loud as hell. And their guitarist made a pact with the devil, and Rob Halford is what? I don't know, a dark angel, whatever he
He's
is.
something. I guess he still sounds fucking phenomenal.
An alien. No, he still sounds like this. I loved Fight too, that
I
side
did too,
project. Yeah. So anyway, these are all amazing, and it ends cheesy as fuck, and that's fine too. Like One Shot at Glory is very much a power metal track. I dig metal. Okay, I just every one of these I could sing its praises. Some of them, the gay undertones very strong in some of these, but that makes me like it even more. I mean, it's he was essentially a drag queen in metal before that was permissible. So just doing it. Work it, Rob. Fierce.
So I'll go next. Painkiller is a fantastic opener. The rest of the first side, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see this. But originally, this is an album that was released on LP, so its sides. It's Painkiller, Hell Patrol, All Guns Blazing, Live the Rebel, and Metal Meltdown on the first side. Nightcrawler, Between the Hammer and the Anvil, A Touch of Evil, Battle Hymn, and One Shot at Glory on the second side. I think Painkiller is a great opener, and Metal Meltdown is a great closer to the first half. Hell Patrol, All Guns Blazing, Live the Rebel, they're okay. The second half, the second side of this LP, Nightcrawler, Between the Hammer and the Anvil, A Touch of Evil, that is a great triple shot. The instrumental of Battle Hymn, I could take or leave. It is what it is. And One Shot at Glory is power metal cheesiness. Not my favorite thing. I actually think it's kind of a weak closer for what is otherwise a phenomenal album.
Is Living Bad Dreams not the closer on that album?
It's a re-release added
Oh.
track.
Because
Yeah, that was added. I listened to
I
it too,
didn't-
but it wasn't on the original.
Okay. So I was listening to that the entire time then.
That's
I
not
didn't
bad.
know.
I listened to it too, but it is not how the album as released ended.
And there was
Okay.
another track too. There's this live
The
version.
live.
Yeah, they did a live version of Live the Rebel, yeah.
Oh, well, they put live in the title track, and I was like, "Doodly, I don't need you," because it's live. But Living Bad Dreams, I just thought it was the final track. So I'm agree. I think I like them all pretty good, but I do think Painkiller, All Guns Blazing, Metal Meltdown, Between the Hammer and Anvil, and One Shot at Glory are probably the tracks I really enjoy off this album.
Well, I'm not going to say anything that is super new either, just to say that I liked all of these. I like pretty much all the tracks. It does end a little bit on the weak side. And my favorite ones are basically side A, Nightcrawler and Between the Hammer and the Anvil. And even though I don't love the way that the album ends, I mean, it's still pretty amazing.
You're great, David.
This album is at least fucking legendary. Obviously, this is an album forged by the metal gods. I don't know. It might be. I'm going to give it a 97. I'm going to break it into that god tier because I do admit that instrumental is meh, and the closer isn't as powerful as the opener, so it's not a flawless diamond, but it's close. So, A plus, 97.
I'm going to come in just a little bit under that. I do think it's a legendary album. That last instrumental and closer, though, just a bit too, just not bad, but just bad enough to keep it from being an A plus.
I'm right there with you, Ben. I think this is an A, no question.
I think it's a legendary album as well. I'm gonna give it a 94 instead of the 95. Yeah, I think it's a great album. I'm definitely adding it to the list. I like it more than I did British Steel when we did it.
I think I might like British Steel just a little bit. What did I give British Steel, Tracy?
It's back in year one still. You gave it an A and I gave British Steel an A minus.
Okay, so I guess I like them about the same. I might like some of the individual tracks off of here just a little bit better because I love Nightcrawler. I think that is a great song. Anyway, what are we doing next time, my friend? You are muted, sir.
Muted as hell.
For the Thunderdome aggregate, we have a 95. So it is Thunderdome approved as a legendary album.
Yeah,
obviously.
Just
look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at the album cover if you don't believe us. Yeah.
It speaks for itself.
It does.
Pretty much.
And next, we're returning back to Soulwork as I make us listen to the 2013 double album, The Living Infinite.
Oh, and a life Ben has been living infinitely months before the rest of us and forever.
Yeah.
That's
my
what we'll
dumb ass
discuss.
listened to this on the blast instead of the assigned homework.
That's what one does.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. I suspect more than Ben, but we're going to find out on Thunderdome Metal Reviews.